Welcome, everyone. Beer Guys Radio Live. We have the one and only Sam Calagione, Dogfish Head, with us today. Sam, thank you so much for joining us.
What's up, beer guys? Good to be here with you today.
Thank you. Both enjoying some good beers. Enjoying times today. Well, Sam, we are going to keep this moving. We know you've got a pressing schedule, so we're going to go right into it. Start recording the radio show. So, Brian, when you're ready, hit us record. Are you recording us over there yet?
Not yet.
Hit us and let's do this. And welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We're broadcasting from the Beer Guys Radio Studios in Marietta, Georgia. And this week we're talking with Dogfish Head Breweries, Sam Calagione. I'm Tim Dennis, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Brian Hewitt.
Hey, Tim. So joining us today, as you said, we have Sam Calagione, the founder and brewer for Dogfish Head. We're going to talk about music and beer, collaborations, ancient ales, classic IPAs, RTD cocktails, Sam's new book, and just a lot more. We have so much stuff that we could talk about.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about.
More than we have time even. So,
yes.
Sam, thanks for joining us.
Brian and Tim, cheers to be here with you as the beer guys.
Cheers. Thank you so much. You know, something that I noticed when Brian mentioned your title, founder and brewer. Sam, how much time do you get to brew these days? Are you on the brew deck a lot still?
So I have our brewmasters from Rehoboth, Brian Selders and Mark Safrick, our brewmaster from Milton, coming over to my house for dinner tonight, and we're trialing a bunch of our latest innovations. And I'm in, all the innovation calls in terms of days that I actually get to get my hands wet and dirty. I'd say it used to be at least monthly. Now it's probably quarterly that I'm in one of our brew houses, and I'm proud to say we have a 10-gallon brewery, a 5-barrel, a 10-barrel, 100 and a 200. So we're brewing at different scales in different buildings every day at Dogfish, and at my cabin up at Dogfish Head, Maine, I even installed a 1-barrel brewery. So I do more home brewing up there. But in terms of actual wet brew days, it's probably once a quarter in the 3 seasons, and maybe every 3 weeks when I'm in Maine more in the summer.
So that's a guy who loves brewing. He brews professionally and then home brews on top of it.
Well,
there's not a lot of people that do that.
Yeah.
They just I brew for my job. I go do other things, but you love it so much when you don't have a chance to do it. You're doing it at home. This is the right job for you. Yeah. In case you were wondering, definitely the right job for you.
Yeah. Just in case you're curious there. I think it was the guys we talked to at Victory, Sam, that he said he finally got to a point where he could actually start brewing again with the brewery. And I think he had an outbuilding at his house, like a garage, that he basically turned into a small, bigger than most small commercial breweries there.
Yeah, seriously.
So time to
full on
brew
pub there, kind of,
Sweet.
Absolutely.
Is that Bill Kowaleski?
I think
I believe so.
Yeah,
I believe
sure
so.
Enough. Yeah.
He opened, I think, a year after we did. I'm great friends with Bill and proud of the guys at Victory. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, Sam, I know you've had this question 1,000 times before, but I'm going to ask you again for our listeners that may not know this. You were one of the early originators, the OGs of craft beer in America. And what got you into craft beer and took you down this path?
So I went to college in Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania, and then I moved to New York City. The day after I graduated, I was taking writing classes at Columbia University, thinking about going towards my master's of fine arts, creative writing. But to earn my, apartment rent, I worked at a bar, and I didn't know as a college kid good beer. And I walked in and got a job bartending and waiting tables at this bar, and it just happened to be a first-generation craft beer bar called Nacho Mama's Burritos on the Upper West Coast. They had really simple, Tex-Mex food, but then their beer list had Chimay Red and Sierra Celebration and Brooklyn Lager and Sam Boston Lager and Catamount Porter, and just had this rad beer selection for 92, 93, and I fell in love with good beer. My shift drinks, I had epiphanies every time I try something new and exotic, and within months of starting to work there, I bought a homebrew kit and shifted. Instead of trying to write, great creative short stories, I started trying to write great creative recipes and a business plan about the first brewery, to focus on culinary ingredients.
See, that's something
fantastic.
We've talked about that early to mid 90s landscape, and we kind of look at it as the brew pub era. You had your brew pubs, there's going to be a golden ale on there, probably a porter, something like that. But that was the extent of it. You kind of looked at a cookie cutter mold for the most part. There were the exceptions there, but that was kind of the recipe for the time.
Yeah, there was spotty breweries doing one-offs during the year that might have one exotic ingredient in them. I think of like Anchor had their winter beer that might have a spruce or fir tip in it. But by and large, no one was brewing with culinary ingredients. And when we opened, Dogfish was the smallest commercial brewery in America, 12-gallon batches in the corner of a restaurant. And I wrote the first page of my business plan, said Dogfish is committed to being the first commercial brewery in America to produce most of our recipes using culinary ingredients. And that was true when we brewed 12-gallon batches. And when I came in to the brewery today to do this with you, I went by our tanks that hold 1,200 barrels of beer in them. And they had ingredients like monk fruit and slightly mighty in them, sea salt and black limes and sea quench. And so we're still doing the same culinary experiments that we did when we were the smallest brewery in the country, albeit just on a grander scale.
I heard that about you being the smallest production brewery or the smallest professional brew pub in the country at one point in time. How small were you at that point?
So we basically took like a homebrew system, like a Sabco that was built out of converted Sankey half barrel 15.5 gallon kegs, and just did some stuff to pimp it out and make it a little more production friendly. Like we built bigger sanitary ball valves, bigger burner units under the kegs to boil faster, a big heat exchanger, professional heat exchanger on the way out. But essentially with the boil space in a 15-gallon tank, you could yield about 12 gallons per batch.
12 gallons. Boy, that's a lot of work to serve people, right?
Yeah, we had a room just filled with 15-gallon kegs that I ripped the tops off of, and I would come out of the boil keg and then waddle the cold keg into this rat room that had racks and an air conditioner. And I had like 12 or 14, 12-gallon beer fermenters going at a time, and then I would transfer into another keg, carbonate it, and put it on tap.
Man, that's crazy. I can't even imagine how much work that is.
And that's, you talked about kind of purposing the system you had for what you needed there. A lot of this stuff wasn't available commercially at the time, so it was a lot of DIY build it yourself type of thing, correct?
Yeah, again, Dogfish, we were one of the first craft distilleries in America because that trend didn't take off until after craft beer, what we call microbrews in the 80s. So I consider ourselves a second generation craft brewery opening in the 90s. And by then, there were a few commercial equipment manufacturers. I couldn't afford to buy new equipment, but they did exist. Unlike, pioneers like Ken Grossman coming up in the early 80s, where there was no one to buy equipment. They had to make everything themselves. But remember, Dogfish opened in 1995 using converted kegs as a brewery and converted kegs as fermenters. And then we hand built a 5-barrel, so about 150-gallon system 1 year later in 96. And then we hand built a 30-barrel brewery in 1997 the next year, just out of used dairy and, small scale, dairy and pharmaceutical food grade stainless steel. So Dogfish never bought a new piece of brewing equipment until our company was 6 years old.
Wow. I've heard that other places using the dairy tanks. It seemed like they were a very popular thing. Well, they're very affordable. So you get them secondhand. Back in those days before, there was a lot of secondhand material out there. Almost everything would have been new that would be made. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I think brewers in general are tinkerers anyhow. So,
absolutely.
Doing stuff like that. We see, a lot of guys that come from engineering into it. So you've got that hands-on approach, and
he's got the creative angle. He's a creative writer. He now expresses himself through, beer, through liquid.
Right.
So instead of words, I mean, though we'll get to it later. He's an author as well.
We'll get to that. Absolutely. Sam, we know, talking about creations and that, I think the Randall, you had the continuous hopping in that. So what else have you created for beer that maybe we don't know about?
Well, you mentioned Randall's, the kind of contraption we built that's like you set it up in line on your faucet in a tap system, whether you're a bar or a home brewer, and the beer runs out of the tap through this cartridge filtration device that we designed that you can fill it with hops or cocoa nibs or coffee beans or, even like Sour Patch Kids. And the beer runs through this contraption, and the alcohol in the beer acts as a solvent and strips the natural flavors off of whatever's in it and just intensifies the experience of that expression of that ingredient in the beer. And then you mentioned continually hopping. So we we took an old-fashioned vibrating football game, and I MacGyvered it with some duct tape and 2x4s and a perforated bucket, and we placed this taped bucket on a vibrating football game over a boiling beer and angle it so the hops would run down, and a little stream of hops would continually go into the original, 60-minute and 90-minute to make them really, really hoppy without being crushingly bitter. And our original football game device is now in the permanent collection of the
Right.
Smithsonian Museum. So we're very proud of that as a recognized along with the Wright brothers planes and the other stuff that's in the Smithsonian. So those are some cool ones. And then most recently, I'm drinking Sequence Ale right now, which is the best-selling sour beer in America. And we're really, really proud of that. And we designed another, purpose-built invention machine that's at the newest Dogfish location, Dogfish Miami, and it's called Sea Quenching Engine. And it's a big contraption that makes full batch, like 15 barrels, hundreds of gallons of perfectly acidified wort that we then add, Florida tropical fruits to do these super fresh fruited sours down there.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's
all the fun
very
stuff.
cool.
I remember a time when it was common to go into your local craft beer bar and see a Randall there, and then to rotate, a fruit, an adjunct.
I miss those. I like that. So like being able to customize your beverage right there at the bar.
Something new and exciting all the time. Well, you're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take a break, but we'll be back very soon with more from Sam Calagione. No, you can keep it running.
Okay.
We normally have these production elements there, but since our producer's out, we're
We'll
slumming
do those
today,
after.
Sam.
You'll
get
do
that.
those,
Yeah.
You'll
Post.
fix it in the mix.
There's a bunch of
do it
buttons
in
over
post
here and
there.
menus on our
Yes.
board that I would have to try to figure out how to do while I'm thinking about questions.
Sam, a few quick viewer comments and questions here. Michael Sorg. Michael from Firewater Brewing Company says, "What's up there, Sam?" So saying
nice.
hey there.
I know Firewater, good stuff.
Robert Parliament, bring back Theobroma. So they have a request there.
Yeah. Well, I know we're going to talk a bit about ancient ale, so I like seeing that.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. Letitia Campbell. Hey, Letitia.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Well, Sam, we're going to keep it rolling. We're going to go right back into this next radio segment and keep things going here. Brian, when you're ready, just give a 5 count and we'll roll on with it.
All right. Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Remember, all episodes are available on demand. So if you missed the broadcast, get the podcast. Beer Guys Radio is available on all popular and unpopular podcasting apps. Now let's get back to Dogfish Head Brewery and Sam Calagione.
We're back. We are back here. Sam, we're going to talk about the beers we're going to enjoy as we talk to you today, our beers of the week. And we want to thank our friends at the Nest Kennesaw for sponsoring this segment, Craft Beer Barbecue. Brian, we ate a mess, I believe is the technical term, a mess of their wings.
We did a mess.
Smoked wings, messy. Don't need any sauce. Go in there and get them. Huge craft beer selection. So if you're in the area, check them out.
Yes.
Right now we're drinking Slightly Mighty from Dogfish Head, a low-cal IPA. It's the cool thing now. Have your beer, but don't get 300 calories from an 8-ounce pour.
Yeah.
We've got the classic 60-minute IPA. And Brian, you went to your cellar and you picked out a vintage. I think it's 2013.
2013, I believe.
Bitches Brew.
Yes.
So we'll get into that. I think we can say that on the radio.
I'm hoping so.
We're going to Sam, do you know? I'm sure you said it
It's
a lot
a
on the
little
radio.
too late. So you can't put the genie back in the bottle, guys.
It's already out.
We'll take care of it in post. We'll
Exactly.
do it in post. Yeah. Well, Sam, talking about this, a big news, I think, with Dogfish Head lately, merger with Boston Beer Company, with Sam Adams. What were the benefits or what were the reasons for two breweries of your size coming together like that?
Yeah, so it's awesome that, when Dogfish opened in 95, there were only 600 commercial breweries in America. And flash forward today, there's over 9,000. And that's awesome. The average American now lives within 9 miles of a local brewery. That's a cool statistic. But in terms of market share, the volume of beer that's sold in America, all of us collectively, in terms of American-owned breweries, all of us share less than 17% market share. So the global conglomerates still control the vast majority of America's beer market. In fact, the largest American-owned breweries are ours, Boston Beer, Sam Adams, Dogfish as one group, and Yuengling is the other. And so in terms of American-owned, we're the largest two, and neither of us have more than like 3% of the American beer industry. So Jim Cook, the founder of Sam Adams, and I became friendly when we were both on the board of the Brewers Association, which is the trade group that represents the vast majority of America's 9,000-ish indie craft breweries. And so as Mariah and I, my wife and I, were growing our mom and pop company, and we saw the landscape changing like 2 or 3 years ago with a lot of these international conglomerates buying out the once, indie American-owned craft breweries, we said, this is going to get really hard nationally to compete when they have these huge sales forces and huge marketing and advertising budgets. And we said, okay, well, we can either retract and be a mid-Atlantic brewery, where our wheelhouse geographically is and where we have more salespeople, or we can go for it and find a partner that fits in the Brewers Association's definition of indie American-owned craft, which is important to us, that upside-down bottle that you see on the packaging of breweries that fit the definition. And that was the choice we made. And, there was really one clear choice, because Boston Beer, they're strong, but pre-merger, they're strong in lagers with Sam Adams, ciders with Angry Orchard, seltzer with Truly, Twisted Tea, whereas Dogfish is strong with IPAs, the best-selling sour beer in America with Sequench, and canned cocktails and spirits. So it was a very complementary, not competitive, portfolio. And our cultures are really complementary too. Like, I got to brew the first collaborative brew with an American brewery Sam Adams ever did, something called Savor Flowers, for the Savor Food Festival in DC maybe 10 years ago. So I went up to Boston, met all the Sam Adams brewers and people, and was like, dang, they're a lot like us. They like to have fun, but they like to compete. And so we knew the merger of the cultures would be great. And on a bigger org chart, there'd be a better chance for our legacy Dogfish coworkers to grow, with the company for decades.
Do you foresee any kind of changes at Dogfish Head as a result of this? Anything that maybe we would notice as consumers, or is it just a matter of getting all the internals working together?
That's a good question. I mean, if you tour our facilities now, you'd see that, we've been able to invest more dollars in Dogfish facilities since the merger. For example, we just put in a multi-million-dollar continuous still, so that we can get out more base spirits for our canned cocktails, in addition to the pot stills from Kentucky we had pre-merger. And then, 5 months ago, we opened Dogfish Miami, our newest brew pub, which we did, in concert with our coworkers from Boston Beer to get that open in the last year. So that's two examples of sort of, an amplified level of financial commitment to Dogfish that we had that didn't exist pre-merger.
Sam, I've got a quick question for you. Talking about the size of breweries and the size that, craft beer, their market share in that, kind of a hot news topic lately has been the changes with can sales from ball canning. And I was curious, I know they went from like 1 truckload to 5, like 240,000 cans to over 1 million. Is 1 million, is that impactful to you at your size? I can't quite scale that mentally.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it does mean it's challenging for breweries that I would say are in the top, like breweries 10 to 9,000 in the BA defined indie craft. It's getting hard if you didn't have long-term contracts, and thankfully a lot of top 50 craft breweries did, but it's especially hard if you're like, I'd say a 30,000 barrel, which is not small. That's still a good size regional brewery. 30,000 or smaller it's hard to get cans now. So yeah, we're of a scale that we can get pretty much what we want, but that's after 26 years of growing our brand. So my heart's with some of the smaller breweries that are having a hard time sourcing anything, but especially cans right now.
Yeah,
Sure.
we've seen recently that I had someone just post the other day on a local forum where they peeled a label and it was another beer label.
That's right.
It was like a printed can that they'd relabeled, and you got to
You're going to see more of that.
Sure.
I'm wondering if we're going to see any kind of a renaissance in glass bottles, because I mean, I like the cans a lot, but is this going to push people to glass again? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? It seems like a bad thing for IPAs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be economic Darwinism. I think there'll be some breweries that have to go to glass because they can't get it, and if their beer is awesome and the community that loves their brand is strong, they'll be able to sell in glass. The question is, once can inventories come back up, will they stay in glass? I think is a question. And, when I drink a 90-minute or a Bitches Brew or a worldwide stout, I love the ritual of decanting it from an elegant looking glass and the
Sure.
pop of the cap and that just sensory experience. But if, like you guys said, IPAs, if I'm drinking 60-minute or even a session fruited sour like Sea Quench, I do prefer that to be in the can format.
It seems to me like maybe that the boxed still lambics time has come.
That's right. That was the time for the boxed beer.
The boxed still beers. There.
It's a beer bladder that's been carbonated. Well, those haven't been carbonated, but I think you could do that with a bladder if you did it right.
No, I don't think a bladder would hold the pressure.
Oh,
I don't think so.
probably.
Because I think structurally, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's not just the material, but the structure of a can helps to
Yeah,
or a glass,
pressure, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you could get like a wine in a box or a twisted tea in a box, but right now I don't think the technology's there to do fully carbed beers in a box.
No 3-gallon boxes of 60-minute coming soon then, right?
Not on the horizon.
Okay.
Let the technology catch up.
They'll all come with a CO2 cartridge that you have to
carb it yourself.
You carb
right
it yourself. There.
That'd be cool.
It'd be fun. We talked about, you wrote a book one time, Sam, about brewing up a business. Did you think so many people would follow your advice and make it happen?
Oh, I mean, it was heartwarming. And, I got to read Charlie Papazian's Joy of Homebrewing to inform my journey from hobby brewer in the early 90s to professional. I'm glad that Brewing Up a Business is a book that a lot of people have come up to me, with, rabbit-eared copies that had opened little breweries and said, this was a really meaningful book when I was writing my business plan, or when I couldn't get over the hump in the second year, or when I was in college and we read it in our hospitality school. So I'm really, really proud of that Brewing Up a Business's book and its kind of place, in that moment in time of brewing. And I look at it as a baton of knowledge, and I was lucky that
Sure.
I got Charlie Papazian passed that baton to me. Michael Jackson, the first generation beer journalist, patriarch, his books were meaningful to me. So I'm glad that my book is just part of that tradition of sharing knowledge that makes the community of craft brewing so rich and altruistic.
We've seen massive changes though since those days, and it's increasingly becoming a drink local kind of world. I've heard a lot of brewers now that are talking about opening. They're not talking about shelf space or regional or national distribution, but really serving the local community. For a brewery of your size, what are the unique challenges to continue seeing growth in the industry right now?
Yeah, I think you're right that it's a proven model of financial strength and brand building strength for small breweries starting up is to focus on that tap room hyper local model. And I think the era that Dogfish and Victory and Stone and Shorts and Russian River and others came up, you could kind of aspire to whatever scale you wanted to. If you want to be a regional brewery, if you make great beer and just want to focus on 8 states, you could do that, or be local, or you could go for it like Dogfish and Stone did and go national. But I think really in the last 7 or 8 years, it's really changed to what I call like the jaws of death. You're either on the top jaw line as a sort of a top 20, I'd say, or top 50 craft brewery, or even what a consumer thinks is a craft brewery. So this includes the brands that are now owned by the international conglomerates. And then you're on the bottom jaw and you're mostly selling direct to the consumer through tap rooms and your own distribution. But the hard space now to be in is sort of that middle space.
The middle.
If you're not top 50, or if you're not hyper local, if you rely on a bunch of distributors in a bunch of states to sell your beer, but you're not top 50 and you're not really a big priority for those distributors, that's an awkward spot to be in, I think, right now.
Would be tough. Absolutely.
It would be.
You are listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take another break, but we'll be back very soon with more from Sam Calagione. I can say that.
Yeah.
Talk all the time, and it's the intros and outros
Yeah,
that always,
that's the hardest
that always
part.
get me.
It's
the tough
intros
spot.
and
The tough
Because
spot.
you're thinking about it.
That's exactly it. Thinking, and that'll serve me for thinking there.
Thinking when you should
Stop
be drinking,
Gosh.
right?
There you
There
go.
we go. Sam, got someone else. Got Norway checking in here with us. Thanks for
Oh.
stopping by.
No, that's
We
nice.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
appreciate
Good
that.
stuff happening around the world here.
Exactly.
That's nice.
And we'll dive into
Should
some
we
of
grab
that
a
for
quick,
sure.
60-minute? I think I'm
Go for it,
about
man.
ready.
I'm still sipping my slightly mighty.
Do I want
but
to steal the
you
display?
crack that 60-minute, and we'll make it happen.
Just
So we can
steal the display
get
one
back
here
in
in,
here.
in the intermission. I was getting so dry over here. Haven't
Parched.
had hops in at least 2 minutes.
You'll make it through this. You'll make it through this. All right. We'll let him get poured there, Sam. We'll go right back at it.
Cool. Do you guys, just curious as fellow beer drinkers, do you try and take a certain number of days off each week of having zero alcohol?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
we do our shows normally on Wednesday evenings, and we have Saturdays are just going out visiting breweries, doing
Yep.
things day.
Yep.
And we usually have well, not with COVID so much, but we would usually have like an event one time during the week.
Mhm.
So me personally,
Mhm.
that was my limit. I figured I
Mhm.
was drinking 3 days a week, quote unquote, professionally.
Yeah.
So I'd hold off the others, especially
And zero
like,
alcohol on 4 days
Right.
a week. Wow.
yeah, especially like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I would really stay off of that.
I'm typically also Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I do when Friday comes around. I want me some IPAs, so I'm not gonna
Ready
I'm not
for
gonna
it, huh?
withhold them from myself, and I just sit down and enjoy some IPAs at home, and of course the Saturday thing. Sunday I always avoid it. I mean, I want to be as clean as I can be on Monday.
Sunday
so-
cleanup day, right?
And
Yeah.
I'm not young anymore, so I can't
That's
just
so true.
I just can't just pound beers on
Bounce.
Sunday and just
Yeah.
wake up on
Yeah.
Monday ready to go. You know?
How about you, Sam? Do you take days
No,
off?
you guys are better than me. My goal is 2 days a week, zero alcohol.
Okay.
And I always get at least one. But I shoot to get 2 days without alcohol, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
And see, for us, it's a little easier because it's not an everyday thing for us. You know, this is our side business. We have day
Yeah.
jobs
Yeah.
that don't require as much drinking. So
right.
They actually kind of
We do a
frown
little
on
better
it, you
there.
know.
Yeah.
When
It's
I'm working
weird.
in IT, they're like, they don't
Yeah.
like it if I've got a full pint of IPA right next to me,
That's
60-minute or
weird.
90-minute.
Yeah,
You know,
they frown on that.
I
don't they?
haven't tried the 120-minute yet. See how that flies, but I'm
That
thinking it will
work.
probably go the same way as the 90 minutes.
It's a
That's
good
what I
beverage.
suspect.
Yeah. All right, Brian, count us
Yes.
down. Bring us
All
back
right,
in, sir.
Let's do this. All right. Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. I want to give a quick shout out to one of our great radio affiliates, WUVR, 1490 AM and 98.9 FM in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Catch Beer Guys Radio on WUVR every Saturday at 10 p.m. Now let's get back to Sam Calagione.
Sam, we brushed briefly on one of your books, and you've written several others. You've collaborated on several, and I believe you have. I believe it's called the Dogfish Head book. Has just recently released, correct?
Yeah, it's called the Dogfish Head book, the first sort of 26 years of our off-centered adventures, and we modeled it. I'm a big music dork, and the Beastie Boys came out with a book like 2 or 3 years ago. It's just called the Beastie Boys book, and it's a
Right.
great, very design, photography, and artwork forward, chronological look of the history of that band, told through the two living members of the band's eyes, but also through artists they collaborated with, artists that were inspired by them. So we really, took that Beastie Boys book format and applied it to the history of Dogfish, myself and my co-authors, which are my wife, Mariah, and Andrew Greeley, who's run our Dogfish Hotel, our the first beer-themed hotel in America, called the Dogfish Inn, and he's a fellow recovering English major like myself. So the three of us proudly wrote it together.
That's great. So people are going to be in for like a visual history of Dogfish Head, basically, or is there a fair amount of storytelling involved?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty evenly weighted. If you look at each page, it averages about half text and half illustration or photography or artwork. But what's cool is it's chronological. So you start with the book with basically, the home brewing era, our first beers, Chicory Stout, Immort Ale, Pumpkin Ale, and then away we go with beers, spirits, canned cocktails, hotels, restaurants, and it just all happens chronologically throughout the book. And we weave in interviews with longtime coworkers so that their voice is part of the journey, not just Mariah and I as the mom and pop founders.
So Sam, you mentioned Beastie Boys. Are you a Beastie Boys fan?
Yeah, I sure am. So I respect their decision that one of their members passed away, and they decided not to keep recording as the Beastie Boys. But I'm a big fan, particularly of the earlier albums like Paul's Boutique.
So
Oh, yeah.
I've got to brag there. I saw Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, and Murphy's Law in Syracuse, New York around 85, 86. So
Whoa,
dating
that's way
myself a little
early.
bit there, but that was one of their first tours there in Syracuse, and they were going to ban them because there were certain things that I can't see on the air that they were known to do on stage.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they promised not to do them, but
They did it anyway.
you may
right?
not want to trust what the Beastie Boys tell you. So,
That's
but it was
true sentence.
but it was a good
But-
show.
Well,
Yeah.
after this next question, I got we'll have to get into the music and beer, but I could tell it's very clear, Sam. You're a storyteller. How important is story to beer?
Well, I think it's especially important to beer when beer is like one of the original things that literally civilization was built around. Literally, humans shifted from hunting and gathering nomads into villages to grow crops, and it's not proven if they were growing them to make beverages with or food. So I like to think beer's responsible for civilization as we know it. And then the other thing is any example of branding or marketing is just a fancy way of saying evocative creative storytelling, right? So to be able to take a recipe and make that like a creative thing in itself, like a poem about volumes of different ingredients, and then write another short story about that poem, which is the marketing description of that recipe, is an awesome opportunity for a storyful, company to embark on with everything that we release. So we really take the story as serious as the liquid itself, and the same with the packaging and the naming of the beers. We the naming's kind of like the most distilled version of a haiku. You want the name to be evocative and unique and creative, but also do the heavy lifting of describing in short language what that beer is about. You guys, Tim, you're drinking Slightly Mighty, slight in calories, mighty in hop character. Sea Quench Ale, designed to be quenching, brewed with sea salt, and it's 3 styles of beer, brewed in sequence with each other. 60-minute continually hot for 60 minutes, 6% alcohol, 60 IBUs. So all that stuff is storytelling at different scales, and we treat it, with reverence.
I've heard a lot of brewers, I won't say complaining, just commenting on the difficulty in naming beers these days. You seem to be very, very, very methodical in the way you do that. Do you struggle? Has there been a great idea you've got together and found that 73 other breweries are already using it?
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, every brewer that I know, professional brewer, keeps like a notes section or their equivalent of awesome ideas for beer names. I have one going of awesome ideas for, beer, spirits, canned cocktail names, and then I have one going of just concepts, recipes. And waking up in the morning, you wake up and you're like, oh, that was an awesome idea. And then you go to Google or Beer Advocate or Rate Beer, Untapped, and you're like, fuck, this little brewery in Spokane already thought of it, or whatever it is. So it's definitely you kind of think there's about 1 million words in the English language, and, 1 or 2 breweries opening every day. It's harder and harder to find concepts and names that haven't been used by someone. And we work really hard. Like some breweries are like, oh, fuck it. It's not a beer I'm going to distribute out of my state. So it's a cool name. I don't care that other people already thought of it, and they'll still use it. And Dogfish, we're not 100% right all the time, but if it already exists commercially by another brewery, regardless of their scale, we try not to step on that, just because we have to defend our own names. And we think it's not good karma if you're not using the golden rule there.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
just
seriously.
be nice to each other. Everybody can play in the same area there, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Sam, you were talking about beer being the foundings of civilization. We are all on board for that concept. We were talking last week about how about the first guy that maybe he messed up and he left his grain out, and he was like, oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble for this. And then, all the powers come together and he ends up with an alcoholic beverage and discovers
I'm
beer.
thinking he was just an assistant. He was getting punished. Like, now you have to this wet grain that
drink
is,
that.
you have to eat this grain and drink this water. And later on, they hear him laughing and singing, and they're like, he's like, no, I'm still getting punished. I'll be in later.
No more of this hunter and gathering and stuff. We got.
I deserve to be punished.
So.
Punish me again.
Exactly.
Yes, right. I've been bad. Yes. But along those lines, tying back into what we talked about, with ancient ales, historical brewing in that. A couple years ago, we had Travis Rupp, beer archaeologist, from Avery Brewing on the show and just had a fantastic show with him. And, you know, one of the questions we asked him is, we always see these news articles talking about beer is this old and it's from here. Then you see another article said it's here and here. And he told us that the scale keeps moving of brewing and finding how old it was there. But going back today and brewing these ancient styles, why is that important to modern beer to do that?
Well, you got to remember when Dogfish started, you know, in 95, we were the first commercial brewery in the country focused on these culinary beers, and they were mostly ideas from my head. Chicory Stout made with as a New Orleans style coffee beer with chicory and coffee, or April Hop as the first fruit infused IPA distributed in America. And I would show up at beer festivals in 95, 96 with these beers, and people, it wasn't like going to a local brewery now and what fruited sours do you have, and you got the Skittle colorful range of fruited sours. Back then, I'd show up at a beer fest and people get mad at me, or they'd laugh at me and say, "Hey, asshole, why'd you put fruit in an IPA? You ruined it. Why'd you put, you know, chicory and coffee in the stout? You're screwing with traditions." So I started in 96, 97, just finding old library books on used book websites about historic brewing, and started researching ancient styles like medieval gruits and medieval braggots. And I'd go to a festival and I'd put one, you know, historic beer on that might have dates and figs in it, or be a hybrid mead and a beer. And when people would laugh at my recipes, I'd like, all right, well then try this. This thing is from, you know, 15th century, you know, Northern Europe, this concept, and it has all these funky ingredients in it. And it reminds people that before the Reinheitsgebot, which is only, I say the Reinheitsgebot, which is the Bavarian Beer Purity Act of 1516, that's a relatively modern form of art censorship. It existed 500 years ago, but humans have been brewing for 10,000 years. So for the vast majority of our species brewing history, we've been fearless with defining beer and what ingredients can go in it. So I know Dogfish was the first brewery in the country to come up with a concept of bringing these beers back to life as an organized concept with our ancient ales from Midas Touch to Theobroma, etc. But I love that other breweries are also looking backwards for, you know, pre-Reinheitsgebot inspiration, you know, for future-looking creative endeavors.
We had Travis Rupp tell us that he was, I'm going to mess up the story, but I think he said he was in Greece, and he found these travel books, these archaeological books that he was looking at, and he was looking at one, and it said, this is for grain storage for bread making or something along those lines. And he looks at it, and I don't remember what he said he noticed there, but he's like, that's not for bread making. That's a brewery. You know, he's like, that is grain storage for the local brewery there. So
yep.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Good stuff. You are listening to the Beer Guys radio show. We do need to take another break, but we'll be back very soon with more from Sam Calagione. There, we did it. We did it.
Cool.
Sam,
Nice.
we brushed on this a little bit, but we do have a question here from Michael Sorg that we mentioned earlier. As an aspiring brewer, is there any quick tips you can give him starting today as compared to what it would have been in the 90s?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and we touched on it earlier, if you're small, I'd say usually the first step is you prove out your brand in your tasting room or brew pub, your own facility, because you know, you get to really control the messaging. You don't have to spend a lot on marketing, and it's more profitable because you don't have to share margin with a distributor and a retailer. So per pint, it's more profitable. And I used to say, oh yeah, like in Brewing Up a Business, I said, prove yourself up in a small standalone brew pub first, and then go to distribution. I think today I would say prove yourself out in a small standalone tasting room, brewery, or brew pub, and then find some complementary town to yours and prove it out again in a small scale where people still have to come in your door to try it. And if you've done that in 2 different towns or 2 different, you know, boroughs of a big city or neighborhoods of a big city, I think then you even have more momentum to go into distribution and start, you know, convincing distributors to prioritize your beverages, because they're getting inundated with new liquids every day from massive companies that have big sales forces, big marketing forces. And it's really hard to get a distributor's attention unless you've got a lot of energy around your brand and brewery locally where those distributors are, so you can exponentially grow that energy by having 2, you know, retail environments instead of 1.
Sam, we've got another one of our local brewers here, Stephen Pete from Kettle Rock Brewing. Stephen, cheers. And Stephen had a question. Wanted to see on your scale, when you say small, what size is small to you?
So really, when I think of small, and it's all relative, I know, but I think of maybe 15 barrel, 15 barrel, and smaller as a small brewery. That's where most people have a tasting room scale brewery. They're usually between a 10 and a 7 and a 15 barrel brew house. And then, because when you get to a 20 barrel brew house, when you think of it only takes like 5 or 6, 7 hours to brew the hot side of a batch of beer. If you got a 20 barrel brew house, you can go into a warehouse that has tall ceilings and put quadruple batch tanks, which are 80 barrel tanks, which is that's a lot of freaking beer. And you can really start distributing tens of thousand barrels of beer once you get to a 20 barrel brew house. So I'd say 7 to 15. That's like a small scale brew house range.
There we go. So Michael, the tip for you is you got to get a tap room.
Yeah, there you go. Get your tap room.
Michael Gypsy Brews right now distributes in the area. So there's the key, Michael. There's the pro tip for you. Get that local tap room.
And story. It's important to beer, man.
Yeah,
that definitely helps the attention to all the little details that you were going through. I was like, I never realized all these things came together, especially with sequence. It's like a sequential situation there with the different beers.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't realize that.
I always love the stories, man. Good stuff.
Yep.
Well, Sam, we've got one more radio segment. I think we've got plenty to talk here on spirits, cocktails, RTDs.
Yep.
So we're gonna go that way with that. Brian, when you're ready, count us down.
If we have time, we could touch on music as well.
We can if we get time.
Cool.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir.
All righty. Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/beerguys. Patrons get cool perks like Beer Guys swag and commercial-free episodes. Now let's get back to Sam Calagione.
Sam, we want to talk about your spirits, about cocktails, all of that fun stuff. And you made a comment, I don't remember if it was earlier in the show or before we went on air. I didn't realize Dogfish Head has been doing spirits for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'd probably say Dogfish Brewery is a second generation craft brewery because I think of Anchor and Sierra and Sam Adams as first gen, those 80s guys. Mm-hmm. But we are truly a first generation craft distillery. We opened our brewery in 95. We opened our distillery. We built it in 01 and opened it in 02. So we're about to be 20 years old with selling our spirits. And right out of the gates, we had our own restaurant, brew pubs. So we were making cocktails out of our base spirits, gins, rums, and vodkas, eventually whiskeys as well. So we've been, making them. And in fact, one of our restaurants, Chesapeake and Maine, was nominated for a James Beard Award like 5 years ago for our cocktail program. So all of that has informed, our recent launch of 12-ounce canned cocktails, where, it's literally been a 20-year R&D process to build those recipes that are now available coast to coast.
Sam, and I think I heard some things where you were talking about gin and tonics, but what is your favorite spirit? When you're out drinking beer, what's in your glass?
Yeah, I'm super proud of, I can't have a lot of it, but we do a beer or a whiskey called Let's Get Lost. It's an homage to a famous, song by Chet Baker. And it's just a super intense overproof whiskey. I love that for little sips, but day in and day out, gin and tonics are my jam. I'd go into Chesapeake and Maine, and we make three kinds of gin. We do a barrel aged one called Melodious Gin. We do one called Compelling Gin, which is very bright and citrusy. And then we do a whole leaf gin that's made with different hop varieties that express really well with botanicals like juniper. So I would go into Chesapeake and Maine and ask the bartenders, make me the kind of gin and tonic that would make Fitzgerald punch Hemingway in the face, and give them that challenge every week and see what they would come up with on that directive. And that really led to our newest innovation, which is a citrus, lemon, lime, basil gin crush. And we're also now just launching a mango and blood orange vodka crush.
What is a crush?
Yeah, those are cans. Those are the canned RTDs, right?
Yeah, and we do other ones, like we do a beautiful blueberry shrub vodka soda that recently won Best of Show at the LA Spirits Award. It's made with a little balsamic vinegar. But the shrubs, so there's everyone's heard of the Bible Belt and the Rust Belt, but the shrub or the crush is a cocktail that was popularized here in Ocean City, Maryland, and coastal Delaware, like two decades ago. That's now exploding up and down the East Coast. So the Crush Belt, I've seen crushes on menus as far away as Long Island and Key West. So you guys, where you are, should be getting crushes coming in bars soon. So it's like kind of like Ranch Waters in Texas. It's a fast expanding regional cocktail trend based around fresh pressed citrus fruits combined with gin, mostly gins and vodkas.
There we go. That's
Sounds
something new for
good,
me.
yeah.
I'm not familiar with those, Brian. So we'll have to.
Well, when it comes to the gin and tonics, the citrusy ones, I've found I enjoyed a great deal, but I also enjoy the cucumbery ones. So
I like a good bourbon and scotch, but if I'm drinking cocktail, I really enjoy gin and tonics. And we have a bar here not far from us that does a make your own gin and tonic. They've got a menu of gins, a menu of tonics, and then additives. I think
they've got an herbal additive,
herbs and fruits and such.
Yeah, like an herbs and a citrus. So you pick your citrus, you pick your seasoning, your spice, basically to put it in. It's it's a lot of fun to do. It's great to do. We've even improvised something a little bit like that here. Something I kind of enjoy, and every now and then they seem like they appear as Boilermakers. Do you have any Boilermakers little beers, spirits combos you enjoy?
We don't do that at Dogfish. We've done some barrel aged beers that are being aged in our spirits barrels, or vice versa. But we haven't really done much with the Boilermaker space.
See, I think Brian is hoping the Boilermaker is cool.
I like
because he keeps bringing them. He brings them up. He's like, the Boilermaker, and he's like the only person I've heard mention it in like 10 years.
Probably.
So,
yeah. I'm a very old man at heart.
But you keep
old
on,
drunk
man.
at a bar at heart.
Do not
old
give
soul.
up. Do not give up there. When you look at craft beer, and I'm sure that's not going to, we know craft beer isn't going away from Dogfish Head. We read an article that said seltzers they're going to get a little less shelf space next year. Craft beer is going to come back and get a little more, and these ready to drink
RTDs are
RTD canned cocktails. For you, where's the focus? Where's the balance at Dogfish Head?
Yeah, so I would say kind of descending order of volume focus. Beer will continue to be the number one focus and number one volume out of Dogfish Brewery for many years to come. But opportunity for growth, and as you said, points of distribution, space on shelves. I do think our canned cocktails are very unique, and I got my hats off to brands like Cutwater and High Noon that have kind of really gained a lot of scale in that RTD spirits-based RTD space. But High Noon's a very different proposition than Dogfish. It's essentially a vodka-based seltzer that competes more with Truly and White Claw at 4.5 ABV, whereas Dogfish had culinary crafted cocktails are all 7% alcohol in a 12-ounce can, which means every Dogfish can cocktail has 2 foolproof shots in every can. So it drinks like a real cocktail experience using real culinary ingredients and fruits. So we think our proposition is really well positioned for where drinkers are going for more flavor, more intensity. So we're excited for that. And then spirits, our foolproof spirits, our whiskeys, gins, and vodkas, unlike our beers and canned cocktails that we distribute coast to coast, the full strength spirits, because we can't make a shit ton of them, are pretty much only available like from New York City to Northern Virginia.
Be fun. I enjoy. You mentioned Cutwater, and it's nice to see quality canned cocktails and more of those coming out, because we've got a few in our fridge. They did, when the Braves won the series this year, Cutwater did a special. I think it was Cutwater, didn't they?
I believe so.
Special Braves. I think
it was like a mule.
They probably
or
just
like
took
that,
one they already did and threw the Braves logo on it.
Probably.
But we fell for it. We bought it. So
nice.
But the Cutwater, they're quality drinks. And, there was a time when you could get a canned cocktail or a bottled cocktail. I could get a Jack Daniel's Lynchburg lemonade, Brian.
Yes.
But that didn't mean it was a quality cocktail.
No,
that I was getting.
Generally was not.
It's good to see those options there. And we have a few local brands. Dry County's one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
That does the canned cocktails. And be cool. I'm cool with those taken. I'm glad to see seltzers sliding out a little
If
bit.
I would prefer there be, if somebody's taking up more shelf space, I'd far rather it be the RTDs and seltzers, and I think my viewpoints on seltzer are pretty well established, but I am down with RTDs. I am down with craft beer. I love beers that are themed off of cocktails. So I think that's all great. But
Sam, are there Dogfish Head seltzers? I don't recall seeing any.
We do it just if you come to our property to give that drinker something, but we're not in a rush to distribute them. But Brian, you brought up cocktail inspired beers, and we started doing our raison d'etre 96 as sort of a wine inspired beer using raisins and beet sugars. And then we've done a lot of meads and beer wine hybrids through the years.
Sure.
But one we're really proud of is if you go visit Dogfish in Miami, we have a machine in that brew pub where we're freshly macerating stalks of Florida cane sugar, and then we're juicing them, and then we're muddling lime and mint, and then we've brewed this really strong base beer that we add all that to, and we do what's called mojito. So it's a mojito, but it's ale based instead of spirits based. So that's my favorite beer cocktail hybrid that we've ever made.
Love beer cocktail hybrids. Sign me up. I'm all about that.
Like a Clamato, right?
Yeah,
the good.
Those are all right. Yeah,
Michelada there.
I don't hate those.
I'm a fan of those, Sam. Brian, not so much, but I'll vouch for
I still like those more than a seltzer. So I'll take that any day over.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, Sam, what's next for Dogfish Head that we haven't covered? What have we not mentioned today that people need to know?
Let's see. Right now, this week, we're bottling our art series where we partner with a different sort of rock and roll world gig poster or album cover artist. We do our art series beers like pumpkin ale, and right now we're bottling one that'll be reaching markets coast to coast here in the coming weeks called Where the Wild Hops Are. So we identified hops that were first found growing out in the wild hop varieties, and then we dosed a fresh IPA with a wild beer that we had aging in barrels for about 3 years. So a tiny dose, maybe 7% of the wort is coming from that. And then we just released our bar cart. So we've had variety packs of beer before, but we've never had a variety pack of our canned cocktails. So it's 8, canned cocktails in one package that's coming out. And then if you come visit us in Coastal Delaware, we just did a really fun release of a rum that's infused with New England maple syrup. So it's a very, holiday centric rum that we just released. Those are 3 things that I'm excited about right now.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
I'm
like all
I
that.
think a maple infused rum would be mighty tasty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sam Calagione, Dog, we need to. We've got so much to see in the Northeast. Sam Calagione, Dogfish Head Brewery. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Sharing your story.
Cheers, Brian and Tim, and really proud to be part of this tradition you guys have going on. Here's to beer guys and gals around the world. Thanks for supporting local and indie.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, that about wraps it up, Brian, for this episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show. Join us next week as we talk to Setting Sun American Craft Sake.
Oh, crazy.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week, and don't forget to drink local. Cheers. There we go. Clear.
All right.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Good chatting with you. Let's see.
Yeah, time flew.
It does fly by. We seriously have 3 more pages of notes with the.
Oh wow!
Better to be over prepared. Let's see.
All these pages.
Oh, Steven's on board with you. He'll talk Boilermakers with you, Brian.
Yeah. I had a good
talk Boilermaker.
I had a thought he might. We didn't get to
beer and a whiskey.
We didn't really get into it in the show, but the Bitches Brew. What's the fate of those? And like Hellhound on my ale, will those make a eventual return in some form?
Yeah, I mean, never say never. We've brought back recently, like we did a raison d'etre, chicory stout. So we are bringing back beers that were on hibernation. Those ones are a little more complex because they were done in a licensing partnership with Miles Davis's family, with Robert Johnson's estate. So it's unlikely that those will come back, but there'll be new announcements of new music collaborations that I'm sure of at least 2 next year. So stay tuned for that.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Yeah.
We have talked to a few musicians and got them in here. And are you familiar with the rap group Nappy Roots?
Yeah, they're from
Okay.
your area, aren't they?
Local
Yes,
guys.
they
They're,
are.
they're
Yeah.
in the process of getting their brewery built out right now.
Oh, good
so
for them.
they've done a few collabs and stuff here with local breweries, but
That's cool.
Crafty
They're doing their own
rappers.
place.
Crafty rappers.
Crafty
they
rappers,
call
indeed. They
Crafty
collaborate.
rappers.
They travel
Yeah.
around doing their music and
They
just
do.
collaborating and visiting breweries as they go. They have quite the life. Let me
At
just tell you.
Kentucky Brewing.
Yeah, that's
They've
right.
Yes.
They've combined two of my loves for sure.
Exactly.
Right. I know. It's quite a racket they've got there.
It
Tort, do
really
that,
is.
So. Well, Sam, we know you got a full schedule. We really enjoyed chatting with you, and we'll definitely we got to do that Northeast trip. We keep talking about it. Too many people to visit up there.
We will definitely drop by for sure.
For sure.
That'd be cool. Happy holidays to both you guys. All right.
You too, Sam.
You
Thank
too.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a
This
good
was
one.
a fun hour. Talk to you later.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Good times, Brian.
Good times.
Good times. Got some Michael, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank
There,
you.
got a little answer, got some advice from the man himself there.
Yeah. Thanks
So
for
good stuff.
thanks for watching. Appreciate that.
Little midweek fun here, Brian.
Indeed.
A little different for us, but we made it happen. So good. Yeah, good time, man. I'm sitting here. So as anyone who regularly tunes in notice, no Mike Nate is not in the studio with us. So we're doing things a little bit different today, but we're making it. I mean, we made it.
I think we did all right. We don't have quite the music all integrated
Yeah,
with
we don't
this
have the
with this
little
live
bells
stream,
and
but the
whistles, but we
important
did it.
parts.
We've got the meat
Yeah.
and the potatoes,
That's right.
and we've got it done there. So yeah,
And the collard greens on the side.
we
all
do,
that's
on the
there.
side. Yeah.
Yeah.
So y'all, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We're gonna log off here. Get back to. I think we still got some day job work to do, Brian.
That's what, yeah,
we'll
I think
see.
so. Yeah,
But y'all have a good weekend. We will be back tomorrow night.
that's right.
If you're watching this live, we'll be back tomorrow night talking to Shiner Beer. So come join us then
Indeed
as
we
well.
will.
Cheers, y'all. Have a good one.